Three. Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Atoma Eji. It's so exciting today. We have with us Brian Perkins and Glenn Giles, who are going to be sharing about a book that they both assisted in writing. The title of the book is The Bible and Gender. So I am so excited just to hear about the process they went through to put the germ of an idea into this complete book to really help us in a great way. So as we start out, I just have a question for you, Brian. Can you explain what the book Bible and Gender is all about?
Okay. Well, this book is basically a brainchild from the teacher service team. And literally what the book is doing is trying to look at 10 very specific passages and trying to give a roadmap for understanding what the passages are trying to communicate. The idea of the book is not necessarily to tell people, this is what we should do, or this is how the churches should operate, but it's trying to bring light on these passages that are difficult passages that speak about men and women and particular roles or things that they would do in the church, and also kind of as it relates to the scripture of the Bible. And so I'm really excited about it because it's kind of like a pure work of exegesis and just trying to study out these passages in all the different contexts, cultural, historical context, to try to get a better understanding of what they're trying to communicate.
Okay, thank you. So is this in kind of a little bit in relation to some of the, I guess I could say maybe fluid dynamics right now with gender and how to look at things, just to give a little bit like some guardrails and some assistance? Is that kind of the thought, or?
I would say it's safe to assume that. I mean,
Okay.
We talk about that, especially in the first chapter. That's not a chapter that I work, but we talked about how God, in the beginning, how God created and what that was all about. And it kind of lays out from a biblical point of view how God looks at the genders, or looks at sex.
Okay, great. So second question for you, Mr. Glenn, is can you please explain the ICOC service team and what inspired them to write about this topic? So we covered that a little bit, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit also.
Sure. Well, the ICOC's teacher service team is made up of men and women from around the world, ICOC members that are teachers in different parts of the world. And it's part of the leadership team, which was the ICOC elders as well as the ICOC evangelists. But its purpose is to advance the teaching ministry of the church and deepen the understanding of the Bible by the church. So that's our whole idea is, okay, how can we advance the understanding of the scriptures? And it's developed curriculum for training people, such as the MTA program, which you can find at icocmta.org. And it has a list of the different courses and even some of the courses there that can be taught to help people. It also has developed a web page for teacher posts. And you can find that at icocteach.org and icocteach.org. And there's several places, there's several things that have been posted there by our teachers. In addition, something that's very exciting is that Dr. Kennard right now is setting up a scholarly journal for our movement. And to have other people in our movement to submit papers and studies to help deepen our faith. Also, at times, since we're the teacher service team, we're asked to do investigations on what the Bible says about certain hot topics, and such as divorce and remarriage. And then that's what happened here for this Bible and gender paper. We were asked to do this paper on this hotter topic that we were experiencing. So basically, that's what the teacher service team. It's a service team to investigate the Bible, to try to help us understand it better, so that we can be better disciples of Jesus.
Okay, thank you. Very, very helpful. So I know you did a lot of the research, and I know that obviously individual members also did their research. But just for the part that you involved with, Glenn, can you share about some of the research, the process that you went through for research?
Yes, I can share. You want me to, excuse me, you want me to share the whole research process, which I can. the teacher service team actually worked on this paper for at least a year and a half. In the fall of 2008, we were asked by the evangelist service team to write about gender, and actually it was women's role at the time, and which morphed into Bible and gender. And so at that point, we decided, okay, let's do that. We took that on. We don't always take on everything they ask us to do, but we thought this was a very important topic for women and for men and for just the churches in general. So we selected a diverse team of teachers, which we called a task force. This involved men and women and various, I don't know if I'd call it racial, but ethnicity involved in it. And then we chose the most important passages we felt in the Bible that talked to this topic. It's either 9 or 10, depends how you number those. The teachers volunteered to do a research on a certain paper, and so in the book you'll find listed the authors of each one of those chapters. The first author mentioned is the main writer of that particular part of the book, that particular chapter. And so the teachers volunteered to initially, individually, the first ones mentioned, would write and research and write a paper on that topic. And then they would come back together on that particular verse, I should say. They would come back together, and then we, as the task force, would collaborate about it. And there's probably at various times up to 14 people, or maybe more, that got together on Zoom or other ways and collaborated on this. And so this took place, those 9 or 10 passages took place, the research took place from January 2019 to August 2019, so about 8 months there. At the end of that point, where we had, as a task force, collaborated with each other, we then got together and talked to the entire service team and let them read it. And at that point, they gave input. And this ended up in October 2019 with the first draft. At this point, we decided, or some decided, I don't know how it was decided, but it was decided to do a detailed examination of those in the task force, those who had familiarity with the biblical languages and theology, have been trained in that, to really look at it in a more in-depth way, each one of those passages. And so several of us did that from November through 2019 through the first half of January 2020. And some of us got together in New Jersey and really went through a 3-day discussion, just combing it as much as we could. And so at the end of that, we came up with another draft after the teacher service team had looked over it again in late January 2020. After that, the paper was then sent to the elders and evangelists who were in Jakarta at that time in February. And they gave us suggestions and edits, and so that ended up in draft 3. Then in March, the papers were sent out to the regional chairs around the world, and they gave feedback, and that resulted in draft 4. Then on March 30th, 28th, 29th, 30th, I think it was March 30th, we had one last review and edit was done. That resulted in the final draft, which you see is published at this time. So it was a big collaboration over a period of 1.5 years from 14 different people, or even maybe some others, men and women, on the topic of this diversity. We needed that. We needed the women's input, not just the men's. And from a scholarly perspective, and those who weren't trained in a scholarly perspective, we're just trying to get a good balance to help really understand what the scriptures were saying. And so that ended up with what's now published as the Bible and Gender.
Wow. Sounds like takes a lot of patience to get through all those steps from.
It was a lot of work. It was a lot of work.
Yeah. Wow. Congratulations.
My part in it was a little bit different than Brian's in some ways, in that I was doing I do bibliographies of the journal articles, scholarly journal articles on each passage. So then I'd give this out to them and they could read it. And I also did some other things, but so there was a variety of different ways you could use your talents in trying to contribute to this collaborative work.
So let me understand this. So basically, if I'm understanding, your role, Glenn, was to do research for all the different 9 or 10 verses or sections of the Bible and provide them to the respective writers along with their own research? Is that generally?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
because I had a lot of background in that and I had access to the bibliographical tools to do that from a scholarly perspective. And so I went and compiled those. I don't know how many pages I have, but I gave each one, I don't know, maybe 50 pages, I don't know, or 100 pages, I don't know. But I provided it for each person's particular passage, and they could choose then from what they wanted. Mine was just specifically articles, journal articles, biblical journal articles. It didn't include as much the books and things like that, but it was focused specifically on scholarly biblical articles from scholarly journals.
Okay. So Brian, obviously you were, one of the people who wrote one of the sections for this book.
Yes.
So you received some of the articles from Glenn, plus your own research, your own Bible study, whether it's Greek, going through and trying to understand the specifics of a passage, or maybe speaking to your spouse or others, however you went about it.
Yeah.
Can you please explain a little bit about your process? And did it take you 8 months to finish it, or how did you, I guess, approach things in your respective chapter? And what
Okay.
was the chapter also?
Yes, and I really appreciate what Glenn shared earlier, because we all believe this was a collaborative work, kind of a community type faith, which I think made the end product much better than any one author could have produced. So specifically for me, coming into the task force, one of the passages, I actually chose 2 passages, both of which relate to marriage, in Ephesians chapter 5 and also in Colossians chapter 3. And so my process pretty much started off with just doing a general read through, being able to dig into the actual Greek of the passage and to do some, just do some exegesis, kind of traditional biblical exegesis of the passage. And that was kind of that was the beginning step, trying to get my own translation of it, see what are the difficulties of this passage. And then from there, kind of doing some study, what does this passage connect to? What are the other verses? And it was interesting that some of our passages were linked to each other, so as you're studying one, kind of drives you to another. And that was really cool. Then when Glenn came up with a bibliography, I believe the bibliography that he helped with my particular passages, about 1.5 pages. I actually was able to go and search out those articles. I didn't get a chance to get access to every one of them, but I got access to most of them. I actually went and read through the different articles. And then I actually also went to a seminary to find books that were written specifically about this either passage or books that were written about this particular topic. And so in all, I probably, I don't know, it was probably a good 40 hours of research on the actual guts of the passage, and kind of the different viewpoints of the passage. What I discovered was that there's 2 major worlds of thought in regards to the passages that I studied out. And I basically put all that together. This was in January. This was in January and February of 2019. And I think my first draft was in February or March of 2019. And to me, this is where it started to get really exciting. I had my study. I had the bibliography that Glenn had written, along with books that I had discovered in my own research. And when that paper was given to the task force, we spent about an hour and a half just kind of mulling over it, talking about it. That first day, I had 4 pages of notes from all the other teachers, and just their thoughts about, hey, well, you thought about this? Did you look at this angle? Did you try this? So basically, I went back to the drawing board again. And from that first draft, a little bit of that survived, but it greatly expanded. We started looking at history. I started looking at culture. Again, to look a little bit more at some of the different viewpoints and what are the strengths and minuses, and all of this you'll see in the paper itself. And I got a chance to bring that about a month or 2 months later to the task force. And again, I got another page and a half of notes from the group. And then we went back and I kind of produced what I would say is the third version from that. What was encouraging for me was at that point, it kind of, my chapter kind of stood on its own. And I was really fortunate to have Steve come on in. This is Steve Kennard, by the way. And he was able to kind of they did one last kind of overview look at all the different articles. And Steve was able to come in and kind of add a little bit extra to the front of the paper, just to kind of make sure it was more outlined. And he's actually able to, I think, really organize the material in a way that was even better more readable. So overall, that process, like Glenn said, it definitely took, it was multiple reviews, multiple hands, and then what I was encouraged is what I wrote is there in the passage, but I think people helped add things to it, to make it better, to make it more readable, but also to help a person who wasn't, coming in from a scholarly point of view to be able to understand it a lot better. One of the reasons why I share that is we decided in the beginning that we didn't want this to be kind of just a contemporary type thing, but we really wanted it to be a deep dive. We wanted it to be something that was meaty. We wanted to have our bibliography and our sources to be sources that could back it up. And so it wasn't just one person's opinion, but it really was a thought out, scholarly written paper. And so I think all the different parts coming together in that research period really helped that.
Wow. So it sounds like a lot of reviews. I think being a writer is what I'm learning is it takes a lot of patience, a lot of revision. And what I love about this, and I'm looking at it on my other computer screen here, it doesn't actually have an author name. It just says ICOC Teacher Service Team. And I think that's very, very accurate. You got everyone working on it together, 14 or so, 10 to 14 individuals, plus the evangelist, plus the geographic, I think you said sector leaders or something to that effect. So I think just the collaboration makes it something that will stand, I think, for a long time, as this is what we as ICOC believe about these 9 or 10 passages. So that's awesome. So you discussed this a little bit, Brian, but what would you say are some of the challenges that you faced collaborating with others, and what would you say are some of the benefits?
Well, I think that's a great question. What I appreciated about the collaboration were there was different teachers in this task force that have different skills. I think that what Glenn did and what he provided for the team was invaluable. It was one thing for me to do my own personal study, but when I was able to receive kind of the articles that he discovered, I think it really kind of opened up a whole nother world to me, and that was very helpful, and I think that really bolstered the paper. The other thing I also thought helped is I don't know how many years of experience and education all the different members of the task force brought to the team, but to be able to have them kind of looking over your shoulder as you're writing something, to just be able to say, hey, have you considered this thought, or have you considered this viewpoint, or maybe have you looked at this particular passage? I think there are points of the paper where we individually had to kind of fight for a viewpoint, and I think it was good to be able to have multiple people in there to try to help with that. I think the challenge was even my viewpoint in studying out these passages kind of changed a bit. I think anytime you study out a passage, you should be open to your viewpoint initially, not maybe being the right one, and allowing the scriptures to be able to tell you what is the truth and what to believe. And so I think one of the challenges is, for me, marriage is something that's taught a lot, and unfortunately, sometimes dogmatically taught that men need to lead. And as I'm studying out the passage, I'm noticing that word is not in the Bible at all, and seeing it as a whole different viewpoint from kind of where I initially started to where I eventually arrived. And I think it was helpful because there were different people on the task force that felt stronger about aspects of this than others. And I think this again makes the paper better. It's challenging trying to have your viewpoint, but also to be able to listen to the viewpoint of others, to honestly and genuinely entertain it and see what is the better position that supports the scriptures. And I think that process was very, very good. I think it is not a process that someone who's insecure, I would
Sure.
encourage them to entertain.
Or prideful.
Exactly. I think at the end of the day, I felt like it was better. And when I think about things that I want to write in the future, that's definitely something that I want to take advantage of. Not just, hey, this is what I think, guys, this is my book, but I would love to write and to be able to have some of my peers here on the team. Hey, what do you guys think? I mean, read this over. How can this be even better? Because at the end of the day, what we want is the Bible to be best represented.
Wow, this is blow away. So this is kind of like a little bit of a newer question to the ones that I had initially sent you guys for review. What has been some of the feedback you've received from either the evangelists in Jakarta when they read it, or others, in terms of how it's helped them to see things differently, or just giving them some insight? Just to the both of you, I guess, starting with yourself, Glenn, and then back to Brian.
That's an interesting question, because I don't remember all the details that finally came from Jakarta, but we've presented this in Denver to our staff, and we're in a process right now. We're in a process of them being able to digest it, but also helping them to understand that this is just a paper that we're of stating what the biblical statement is, what the biblical exegesis involves. It's not an application paper. So one of the biggest questions we got from Jakarta, I think, and everybody else was, well, you need to tell us what to do. You need to tell us what it means today. We need to be able to know how. But that wasn't the intent of the paper, because there's so many different cultures. It's going to be applied in different ways. And so we can't make a statement that is across the board for everybody. But we felt like we could make a statement as what the Bible says, at least as far as we could tell, and to our best ability. And so that's one of the biggest hurdles right now, was helping people to understand that this paper wasn't something to tell them what to do now, but it was to elicit principles of that day. And then we have to, as a church, as different churches and regions, have to decide how we're going to implement those principles. So I think that was probably the biggest question from Jakarta and from other places, and here in Denver too. It was one of the similar things that we had encountered.
Good deal. Brian, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Glenn said it right. I very much think of this paper being like instead of us trying to start our own religion, us trying to translate the Bible in a way that everybody can understand. You know, back in the Restoration or Revolution days, when they were trying to figure out what the Bible says, it seemed like everybody was saying, oh, this is what I think it says, and do it this way, or this is what I think it says, and do it this way. And there are others who just said, just translate the Bible in a way that everybody can read it and figure it out. And I think we were trying to be interpretive and not directive. So now that you guys have figured out what, have cleared the air of what these scriptures are saying, what do? We feel very strongly that it's our role to help, to be a tool, to be a service to the kingdom of how can we best interpret and read our Bibles. Now it's going to be up to the leaderships of individual churches on how to actually direct this. How do we actually put this into practice? And so I do think that that was a challenge. The thing I think was most encouraging, and this is what I do remember, was as it was passed to the evangelist service team and to the elder service team, was that our viewpoint wasn't a major shift. It wasn't this, oh, we discovered we've been doing it all wrong. It was more of a wow, an amazement of, man, our own scholars have studied the scriptures, and what we've come to is very much in line with what we believe. And I think that was really, really good. It's easy in a situation like this to say, hey guys, let's find something new and fresh, something that's exciting that, but in reality, what we came up with, I think, is a more up-to-date version of what we already believe. I think it was an affirmation in a big way.
That's awesome. Okay. So we covered this a little bit, but maybe you can elaborate. So people that do want to collaborate on their own book, what advice would you give them as they kind of decide to embark on the task? If you can maybe start, Brian.
I was going to say, again, I always defer to Glenn because I look up to Glenn. He's pretty awesome. I think if someone wanted to be involved in a collaborative process, it would be really great to, if you're a younger writer like myself, to be able to find seasoned people who've been involved in this already, because they can give you great direction, give you great insight, and help point you in different directions. I do think if someone comes upon something novel, I would advise them strongly to have that reviewed. I think peer review is a huge thing, and I think in our papers they should be peer reviewed. I think in the things that we write, we should be open to that. Peer review isn't telling someone that what you have is wrong, but it's giving another viewpoint so that what you produce can be balanced. And I think having a balanced writing things that are balanced is much better than just a dogmatic viewpoint. That's my initial thought.
Awesome. Glenn?
Yeah, I think Brian said it well. I think there's two things that come to my mind. I think Brian even mentioned those, or maybe you did too, Tom. One was humility. It takes a lot of humility to say, okay, this is what I see. What do you see? And I'll change, if I'm convinced of that. And we had to have a lot of that. There was a lot of going back and forth. But it wasn't bad. I mean, most everybody had humility. So I think everybody did, in fact. So I didn't really find tension there. And it really made it more of a joy to go through these papers. And as we went through, there were some things that were stated that we had to sit back and think, okay, maybe I'm going to have to change my view on that. So that was great. And then the second thing was to allow everyone to use their specific gifts, their talents, their backgrounds. Some people chose papers, I believe, that they had already written on. So it helped to be able to embellish what they had. They drew from what they had in the past. And so I think just using your different talents, your gifts, and what you bring to the table, allowing that to happen really helps the whole process and helps to have a better paper. That was the main things I think I saw on that.
Yeah,
I will say, you want to say something, Brian?
I was going to add, if this could help, as a very specific example, I wrote my paper, and then Steve Kennard came in to collaborate with me. Steve Kennard really is a great New Testament scholar, and I really appreciated his help. One of the things that he did as an example of this is when I originally wrote the paper, I put the Galatians passage first because it had the most kind of meat to it, and I put the Colossian passage second. When he went through to do a revision, he made the suggestion that we swap those two because the Colossian passage is a little bit more compact, and whereas the Ephesians passage is a little more meatier. And I totally agree that was a better way of doing it. But I appreciated having his wisdom, having his impact in that. I think it made the paper better overall. And I think we were able to use one passage to help bolster up the arguments of another passage in a better way. That's just an example of how working together made it better.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. As we wrap it up, if you can maybe share how people can find out a little bit more about your ministries and kind of what you guys are working on right now. I guess you can start, Brian.
Just a few things. Right, I lead the Louisville Church of Christ, and you can find more information about us at the Louisville Disciples. We're in the midst of changing our website now, but we're on Louisville Church of Christ on Facebook, on Instagram as well. We have my ministry. I have a blog called Brian's Blog, and you can find that at drbrianperkins.com. And currently, I am working on both my Spanish and with the hopes of being able to continue writing. I definitely appreciate that. More about the nature of God, and so those are some things that interest me personally. But yeah, that's what's going on with us here in Louisville.
That's awesome. And for those that don't know, Brian actually studied the Bible with me many moons ago, and it was definitely life-changing. And so I definitely always appreciate just to get a chance to chat with you and just reminisce and all those good things. So thank you. Glenn?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you, Brian, for filling in what you're doing. That's awesome. I'm the professor and actually the founder and professor of Bible and theology of the Rocky Mountain School of Ministry and Theology in Denver, Colorado. We started our school about 2014, and it's a graduate school. Actually, it's a seminary now, since we're also involved in Master Divinity programs. So we've got several master's programs, including counseling, pastoral counseling, and all kinds of training. We've got students, it's all online, so we've got students from around the world, I think 39 different countries, with probably 110 people taking things for credit. And we're not yet accredited ourselves, so we have worked in conjunction with Lincoln Christian University in Lincoln, Illinois, which is accredited. And so we have courses that transfer. Half of their courses can transfer into Lincoln to get a degree there if they need a accredited degree. But a lot of our people in the third world, and actually it's called majority world today, don't really have enough money to even take anything that's accredited here in the United States. And so we have courses that are super discounted for the majority world, because one of our hearts is to be able to train our missionaries, our people, our leaders in the majority world as well as in the first world. And so God's really opened up a lot of doors, and we've tried to go through those. We had 5 graduates last year. This year with the pandemic, we are putting that on hold until next year, but we have 4 that should graduate this year with their master's degree, but they'll actually walk in the graduation next year. So it's just been very exciting. And you can find all the information at Rocky Mountain School of Ministry and Theology. It's rmsmt.org, rmsmt.org. And if you have any questions, you can also contact me, and my information's on there too. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Thanks to both of you for the work that you did on this incredible book. I know it's going to definitely stand the test of time, because it was definitely put together with great humility and has been reviewed by many, many people. So again, thanks so much for your time, and have a great rest of the day.
Amen.
Thank you.